Welcome to Stories from New Eden, the podcast where history, myth, and forgotten truths converge among the stars. I'm your host, Zal Arbosa, and here we dive deep into the lost archives, black site reports, and whispered legends of the EVE online universe. From the rise of ancient civilizations to the silent horror of wormhole space, each episode uncovers the hidden narratives that shape New Eden, the truths behind the empires, the lies buried in the ruins, and the echoes left behind by those who vanished. Whether you're a hardened capsuleer or a curious newcomer, this is your gateway to the lore that breathes life into the void. This is Stories from New Eden. Let's begin. Deep within the rugged wilderness of their ancestral stronghold, the Bruta tribe prepared meticulously for the moment that had been years in the making. Every whispered conversation, every fierce training session, and every covert supply run had led to this night. The once fractured tribes, scattered and haunted by the scars of enslavement, were finally ready to move as one. Marla, the battle-hardened scout and fierce warrior of the Bruta, stood before the ancient stone altar where the faint pulse of a secret Gallente signal had just broken the long silence. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with fierce excitement. This was the call they had dreamed of, the green light to strike at Rens, the Amarr-held system, a jewel of their stolen heritage. For generations, the Amarr had ruled with an iron fist, their arrogance blinding them to the growing fire beneath their feet. They looked upon the Minmatar as little more than slaves, dismissing any thought of organized resistance. This contempt bred complacency. Fortifications grew weaker, patrols less vigilant, and discipline slackened. Years of enslavement had dulled their vigilance, leaving cracks in their seemingly impenetrable grip. Though the Gallente remained in the shadows, providing vital intelligence, encrypted communications, and critical logistical support, the assault would be led solely by the Minmatar militias and allied tribal forces. The Gallente's role was one of careful discretion. They supplied the spark, but the fire was kindled by the Minmatar themselves. Marla's voice rang out, steady and commanding. Phase 1. Disrupt communications and sensor arrays. We blind their eyes. Phase 2. Swift strikes on key defense installations, energy grids, weapon emplacements, and supply depots. We cripple their strength. Phase 3. Coordinated ground assault by our militias and tribal warriors. We reclaim what is ours. As word spread through the camp, a palpable energy surged. Young warriors gripped their weapons with renewed purpose. Elders offered prayers to ancestors, their chants weaving hope through the crisp night air. This was not just a battle. It was the reclaiming of identity, a reawakening of spirit long suppressed. The Thukka caravans, once nomadic traders, now served as vital supply lines, ferrying ammunition, food, and medicine through shadowed routes undetected. Stealth frigates, cloaked in the void, prepared to infiltrate enemy lines. Sensor jammers flickered to life, shrouding the assault in electronic silence. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first salvo erupted in the void above Rens, light blazing through the darkness, a herald of liberation. Marla's eyes glistened with tears, not from sorrow, but the fierce joy of freedom ignited. This is more than war, she whispered. This is hope made real. The assault swept through Rens like a tidal wave, precise, relentless, and united. Where once the Amarr held dominion, now the fires of rebellion burned bright. The fractured tribes, bound by years of hardship and the promise of a new dawn, moved as one. The liberation of Rens was not merely a strategic victory. It was the resurrection of a people's soul. As the last Amarr forces retreated, Minmatar voices rose in triumphant song, echoing across the stars. The chains had been broken, the future reclaimed. Part 1. The Old Tribes, Mythology, Culture, and the Early Clans. We are the dust of the stars and the blood of our ancestors. Every tribe, every tattoo, every word spoken beneath the twin moons of Pator. These are our truths, and no empire can erase them. Ancient Matari proverb, oral tradition. Long before the darkness fell, before the ships of the Amarr crossed the void to shatter a world, there were the tribes. The Minmatar civilization traces its roots to the planet Pator, in the system of the same name within the Starkmanir constellation of Heimatar. This cradle world was home to a vast and complex tribal society, a civilization bound not by rulers or conquest, but by ancestral memory, spiritual connection, and shared survival. The Minmatar people, known collectively as the Matari, developed sophisticated cultures grounded in oral history, tribal governance, ritual, and kinship long before they reached the stars. At the heart of Matari civilization were the 7 tribes, each with its own customs, responsibilities, and sacred roles. The Sebestor, known for their intellect and ingenuity, were the engineers and architects of the future, designers of spacecraft, keepers of data, and stewards of ancient technologies. The Bruta were guardians and warriors, revered for their physical strength, but also for their unwavering spiritual discipline and role as protectors of sacred traditions. The Verokir moved between worlds and tribes, wandering seers and traders who carried with them the deep mysticism and oral histories of the people. The Crucial, fierce and defiant, were experts in subterfuge and survival, often distrusted by outsiders, but respected for their tactical brilliance and ability to endure in the harshest conditions. The Nefantar once served as intermediaries and diplomats, skilled in negotiation and cultural exchange, though their legacy would later be complicated by collaboration with the Amarr during the occupation. The Starkmanir, deeply spiritual and philosophical, were master artisans and custodians of ancient rites, many believed lost during the slave era, until their rediscovery reignited ancestral hope. Lastly, the Thaka tribe chose the stars over settlements, taking to nomadic life in great caravans that traveled the reaches of space. They became expert navigators and merchants, bridging gaps between scattered Matari enclaves during the darkest of times. Though each tribe was distinct, culturally, spiritually, and socially, they did not compete for dominance. Instead, they formed a loosely bound but deeply interwoven society, held together by bonds stronger than steel, bonds of memory, belief, and obligation. These ties were not enforced through law or central authority, but cultivated through ritual, consensus, and story. Knowledge was passed not through books but by griots and shamans, keepers of the past, who carried songs and names older than memory. A Matari child might know the names of 10 generations past before learning to count. To forget was to dishonor. To speak a name in ritual was to make it live again. Spirituality and the stars. Before they looked upward, the Minmatar looked inward. Spirituality among the Matari was never centralized or doctrinal. Each clan, and often each shaman, kept unique interpretations of cosmology and the spirit world. Yet some beliefs were shared across tribes, especially the reverence for ancestors and the Voluval ceremony. The Voluval is one of the most sacred rituals in Minmatar culture. It marks a coming of age, a rite of passage where a Matari receives a tattoo dictated by the ritual, a mark determined not by choice, but by fate. The design appears in moments, forming spontaneously as ancient biosymbolic ink reacts to the subject's skin and, it is said, their spirit. Some marks are common, symbols of strength, wisdom, fertility. Others are rare, revered, or feared. A person bearing the stark-marked voluval, for instance, may be seen as blessed or cursed depending on clan and tradition. Whatever the mark, it defines one's place in society and can open or close paths for life. The Minmatar also held a sacred relationship with the stars themselves. Celestial bodies were believed to house spirits, memories, even echoes of the ancestors. Navigation, both literal and spiritual, was taught as a form of communion. In this, the Thaka tribe, nomads of the stars, became the Matari's first true spacefarers. As the Matari began to develop spaceflight, they did so not for conquest, but for trade, discovery, and connection. They expanded into nearby systems, establishing colonies with deep reverence for balance and sustainability. Their growing interstellar civilization was known as the Minmatar Empire, not an empire in the classical sense, but a cultural expanse of kinship and collaboration. In a chronicle titled The Seven Tribes, it said, "Their ways were ancient before they left the dirt of Pata. They built from wind and sand, carved memory into stone, and spoke truths older than language. They did not need ships to be mighty. They needed only to remember." Tribal unity and governance. Unlike centralized empires, Matari governance was inherently decentralized. Power rested in tribal councils, clan gatherings, and circles of respected elders. Decisions were made by consensus, often after long deliberation, and enforced not by law, but by the weight of tradition. The Sebiestor, often seen as the intellectual core of the Minmatar, maintained vast archives of engineering knowledge, even during times when written record-keeping was rare. It was through their innovations that the Minmatar first achieved orbital flight and, eventually, warp capability. Though practical and technologically inclined, the Sebiestor were deeply spiritual, believing every tool and machine had a spirit that needed respect. The Bruta, by contrast, were known as warriors and protectors, but never mindless soldiers. Their strength was not just physical, it was spiritual and social. They guarded sacred sites, performed rituals of strength, and served as defenders of the clan in the face of natural threats and later, foreign ones. Many Bruta oral traditions contain cautionary tales of unearned pride, honoring warriors who tempered their might with wisdom. The Veracure, elusive and enigmatic, were seers, dreamwalkers, and traders. They were the carriers of secret knowledge and prophecy, often wandering between clans to mediate disputes or deliver messages no one else dared to speak. Even today, Veracure bloodlines are associated with spiritual leadership and a connection to hidden truths. Each tribe, including those more often misunderstood, like the crucial and the later maligned Nefantar, had their place in the latticework of Matari life. Before the darkness came, there was balance, if not always peace. Disputes flared, rivalries brewed, but the Matari understood unity not as uniformity, but as coexistence with meaning. This is a crucial distinction that survives even in the post-liberation era. As one line from The Speaker of Truths puts it, "We were not always in agreement, but we were never without purpose." The calm before the storm. By the time the Minmatar had reached over a dozen systems and established early jump gate technology, their empire was entering a golden age. Trade routes stretched between Pator, Hugger, and Hek. Stellar cartography advanced rapidly, led by crucial explorers and Tucker scouts. Clan-based markets flourished, exchanging both technology and spiritual artifacts across the constellation. Their society was complex, evolving, but still anchored in oral governance and tribal continuity. No Matari child grew up without knowing the sound of clan drums or the weight of ancestral stories passed down at dusk. And then it ended. The Amarr came not with trade or curiosity, but with fire and chains. The golden fleets crossed the stars and cast the old tribes into shadow. But that is a story for another time. Still, the legacy of the old tribes endures, in symbols etched into flesh, in whispered stories aboard drifting Tucker caravans, in every Matari heart that beats with memory and defiance. They were broken, scattered, enslaved, but they never forgot. And in Minmatar culture, to remember is to resist. Part 2. The Empire's Chains. When they came, we did not know what they were. They spoke of God, but brought chains. They promised unity, but burned our homes. We remembered every name they erased. Speaker of the crucial. Oral record fragment. The Minmatar had just begun to spread through the stars. Their tribal civilization flourished across the worlds of Pator, Aram, Hek, and Hugger, thriving through a loose but vibrant web of spiritual unity and ancestral memory. But where they saw kinship and balance, another empire saw disorder and weakness. The Amarr came from the stars not to trade, but to conquer. The Empire had already subjugated dozens of worlds under the divine banner of the Reclaiming. With recovered warp drive technology and a theocratic imperative to enslave unbelievers for spiritual salvation, the Amarr saw in the Minmatar a vast source of labor and souls to convert. From the first contact to full-scale invasion, it took the Amarr little more than a few decades to cripple the fragmented defenses of Minmatar space. The Matari were culturally unified, but lacked the military structure to resist a war machine honed over centuries. Faith is not a shield, faith is a sword. The Empyrean Age, Chapter 13. The invasion quickly turned into the largest known act of mass enslavement in New Eden's history. Entire tribes were broken and relocated. Within a century, the Amarr had established control over nearly every populated Minmatar system. For approximately 400 years, billions of Matari were held in bondage, scattered across the empire, assigned to labor in mines, farms, shipyards, or holy complexes on worlds far removed from their home systems. Tribal identity was not erased, but suppressed. The voluble ceremony was forbidden. Clan names were stripped from records. Shamanic leaders were arrested or executed. Oral historians, tale speakers, became a persecuted class. In secret, songs were still sung, tattoos still etched under cover of night, and names still whispered from one generation to the next. These quiet acts of remembrance became themselves a form of rebellion. The Amarr Empire did not enslave the Minmatar people as an act of random cruelty. It was calculated, systemic, and integral to the functioning of Amarrian society. To the Amarr, the Minmatar were a solution to an empire built on spiritual hierarchy, but sustained by labor. For every golden cathedral, there were countless hands bound in servitude. For every rite of the Reclaiming, there was a Matari voice silenced beneath it. Minmatar slaves were used extensively across the Amarr domain in agriculture, mining, heavy industry, construction, and shipbuilding. In the lush equatorial belts of worlds like Korsiki or Sarum Prime, enslaved Matari toiled in fields under brutal heat, harvesting staple crops for Amarrian noble houses. In the Tashmerkon holdings, they were deployed en masse in mining operations, digging deep into asteroids and moons to extract vital ore for the Empire's expanding fleets. The Sarum family, known for its militarism and austere orthodoxy, employed large slave contingents in its weapons foundries and orbital shipyards. There, Minmatar workers constructed parts of the very vessels that patrolled their home systems, vessels that bore the sigils of their captors. These same laborers were often subjected to religious indoctrination during rest hours, forced to sit through sermons delivered by Amarrian clerics as part of their spiritual rehabilitation. Entire planetary settlements were converted into slave production zones. Records suggest that holder families competed over breeding quotas, using Minmatar slaves not only for labor, but as generational property, raising future laborers in controlled environments where knowledge of the tribes, language, and traditions was deliberately stripped away. In this way, cultural genocide became a side effect of economic convenience. Certain skilled Matari, especially among the Sebiestor and Starkmanir, were identified for their engineering acumen or artistic talent and redirected to serve more refined functions. Some were made to craft ornamental works for Amarrian noble courts, while others were exploited in the maintenance of jump gate infrastructure or planetary reactor cores, their knowledge passed on in whispered fragments beneath the watch of slaver overseers. And always, hovering above them, was the Amarrian doctrine, the idea that this suffering had divine purpose. The Minmatar were not seen as equals fallen from grace, but as raw material in need of shaping. The Empire needed their strength, but it demanded their submission. It is not cruelty to mold the unworthy. It is the duty of the faithful. Amarr scripture, book of missions. But even in the Empire's forges, even on the cold floors of forgotten processing moons, the Minmatar remembered who they were. The Starkmanir tribe, known for their gentleness and artistry, were all but annihilated after a failed uprising. Only a handful survived, hidden, scattered, nearly forgotten. It would take centuries for them to be rediscovered, but in the minds of the enslaved, the loss of Starkmanir became a symbol of all that had been stolen. Among the tribes, no betrayal cut deeper than that of the Nefantar. Facing extinction, a faction of the Nefantar aligned themselves with the Amarr, adopting the Empire's faith and assisting in the management of Minmatar slaves. They were rewarded with limited autonomy and rebranded as the Amatar, or Mandate citizens, forever cast as traitors by many of their kin. The Nefantar called it diplomacy. We called it surrender. The Amarr called it salvation, but only the chains endured. Oral history fragment, Sebiestor archive. In the Empyrean Age, we are given a glimpse into the psychological toll of this oppression. A Sebiestor priestess named Maleatu Shakur, later to become Sanmatar, reflects on the magnitude of the loss. We lost everything: the soil under our feet, the stars above our heads, the words of our fathers and the songs of our mothers. They took it all, and they told us it was for our own good. The Empyrean Age, Chapter 8. The Amarr rationalized their conquest through the doctrine of the reclaiming, believing slavery to be an act of spiritual mercy. To enslave the Matari was to bring them into the light of God. But under this mercy lay cruelty, cultural erasure, and centuries of suffering. The first step toward enlightenment is obedience. The second is silence. Amarr scripture, book of trials. The crucial tribe, fiercely independent, became the hidden thread of resistance. Their deep knowledge of terrain and subterfuge enabled covert operations even within occupied zones. Smuggling routes were maintained by sympathetic Thaka caravans, who, having never been fully conquered, served as lifelines between rebel cells. Every act of remembrance became subversive. Brutal warriors tattooed forbidden glyphs beneath their tunics. Verrocchio seers preserved the Voluvol ink in sacred jars, passed hand to hand. Sebiestor artisans encoded messages in mechanical designs. The Amarr never fully understood. The rebellion had already begun, not with weapons, but with memory. In the Empyrean Age, during a dialogue between Midula and Amarr envoys, this tension is laid bare. You do not understand us. You think we are weak because we serve, but we remember. We always remember. And when the time comes, we will rise. The Empyrean Age, Chapter 19. The Amarr's failure was not technological or logistical. It was spiritual. The Minmatar spirit, forged in tribal unity and ancestral memory, could not be broken. The more the Amarr stripped away, the deeper the Matari rooted themselves in what remained. By the time cracks began to show in the foundations of the empire, the Minmatar had already sown the seeds of their uprising. Part 3. The Day of Darkness and the Rebellion. The stars went out that day, not in the sky, but in our hearts. Survivor account, Matari Oral Archive, referencing the Day of Darkness. For nearly 4 centuries, the Minmatar endured the chains of the Amarr Empire. Generations were born into slavery, growing up never knowing the songs of their tribes or the stars of their homeworld. Rituals faded into shadows. Languages became whispers. Hope became a fragile thing. Yet, as the Empyrean Age reflects through the voice of a Verrocchio ritual speaker, we remember the Day of Darkness not for what we lost, but for the silence that followed, the silence before the storm. That silence was broken by a determined uprising. The Day of Darkness, as it is now remembered, marked the nadir of Matari history, a moment of despair so total it scorched itself into the cultural memory of the Minmatar people. It is not a single date in a ledger or a military campaign, but a psychological event, the point at which the Minmatar realized they had lost their freedom completely. I remember the silence. We were told our gods were lies, that our mothers were heathens, that our ancestors were filth. I watched my father fall to his knees and kiss the boot of a holder. That was the day I knew the stars had betrayed us. Excerpt from The Last Light, Starkmanir oral record. But history does not end at its darkest point. Over time, resistance began to coalesce, not in the form of armies, but in fragmented cells and scattered outposts. The Thaka tribe, having remained mobile and largely independent, began to pass messages between enslaved enclaves. The Crucible rebuilt forgotten relay systems. Rebel shamans encoded songs with strategic data. Entire generations of Minmatar lived in quiet defiance, awaiting a signal that would one day come. When the rebellion ignited, it shocked the entire cluster. As reported in a Scope News broadcast covering the conflict centuries later, the Day of Darkness marked a turning point where the oppressed refused to be shadows in their own history, a defiant blaze that challenged the might of the Amarr Empire and set the stage for the Minmatar Republic's birth. This was not merely a battle for territory or freedom, but a reclamation of identity and hope, echoing through every liberated system. The signal arrived in the form of a newly empowered Galente Federation. In the year 23,216 AD, over 700 years before the present YC era, as the Amarr Empire focused its attention on internal politics and external diplomacy, the Minmatar launched a full-scale uprising. The rebellion was not spontaneous. It had been brewing for years, coordinated in secret by freedom fighters who had infiltrated every level of Amarrian industry and logistics. When it came, it struck across dozens of systems at once. Ships hijacked from dockyards, storage depots exploded, gate relays disabled, entire orbital stations plunged into anarchy overnight. The most symbolic act occurred on Pato, where Matari freedom fighters took control of their ancestral homeworld for the first time in centuries. Religious monuments were toppled. Amarrian slavers were executed publicly. The vol-au-vent ceremony was performed openly again. The Amarr were caught off guard. Despite the scope of their military, they had overextended themselves, convinced that the Minmatar were too fragmented and broken to rise. But in truth, the tribes had never forgotten how to fight. They simply needed to remember how to fight together. In the Chronicle, The Day of Darkness, a captured Amarrian reports the chaos. They came from every direction, not soldiers, but workers, slaves, even children. They used tools as weapons. They fought like they had nothing left to lose. I saw a priest flayed with his own scriptures. Some tribes were instrumental in the rebellion's coordination. The Sebistor managed orbital communications and logistics sabotage. The Brutor led ground assaults and liberated labor camps. The Verrocchio maintained escape routes and spiritual morale. Even former collaborators among the Nefantar provided intelligence, some out of guilt, others out of necessity. Within months, the Minmatar controlled several home systems and declared independence. The Amarr Empire responded with fury, but their retaliation was slowed by diplomatic constraints and the threat of Gallente intervention. The war did not end cleanly, but it created the Minmatar Republic and ensured that billions would never again be born in chains. We did not win our freedom. We tore it from the throat of a god. Sanmatar Maleatu Shakur, speech to the Tribal Council. The Day of Darkness is still remembered every year. In the Minmatar calendar, it is not a day of mourning but of defiance. Across Pado and beyond, torches are lit in silence, then extinguished one by one to mark the long darkness. But at the end, a single flame is always reignited, passed from hand to hand, to remember, to resist, to endure. Part 4. The Founding of the Republic. In the wake of centuries-long enslavement under the Amarr Empire, the Minmatar people emerged from the shadows of oppression to forge a new destiny, the Minmatar Republic. The founding of this republic was not a simple act of political declaration. It was the culmination of decades of struggle, survival, and an unyielding determination to reclaim not just their freedom, but their cultural identity and dignity. The Day of Darkness and the rebellion had shattered the chains of slavery, but the Minmatar were left scattered and fractured. Tribes dispersed across their ancestral systems, some decimated, others changed irrevocably by captivity. These survivors faced the monumental task of rebuilding their society from the ground up, while confronting the enduring wounds of cultural suppression and betrayal. From this crucible, the Minmatar Republic was born, a confederation founded on the principles of tribal unity and mutual respect. Recognizing the deep cultural diversity among the 7 tribes, Sebiesto, Bruto, Verrocchio, Crucial, Tulka, Starkmanir, and Nefantar. The Republic was established as a federated government designed to respect each tribe's autonomy while uniting them against external threats. This political structure was unique. A council composed of representatives from each tribe ensured that no single group could dominate, fostering a delicate balance of power. It was a system born out of necessity, designed to heal old wounds and build a collective identity rooted in shared hardship and hope. Yet, founding a republic was more than politics. It was a profound act of cultural revival. The Minmatar sought to rekindle the traditions, languages, and rituals that had been suppressed or nearly lost during their centuries of bondage. The restoration of the Volleyball ceremony, tribal tattoos, and oral histories became acts of defiance as much as remembrance. The Republic's founding was also shaped by pragmatic necessity. With the Amarr Empire still a looming threat, and other factions wary of the newly freed Minmatar, establishing a functioning government capable of defense and diplomacy was crucial for survival. The Minmatar Republic emerged not only as a symbol of liberation, but as a nascent power navigating a complex political landscape. This delicate emergence, from shattered chains to self-rule, set the stage for a society defined by resilience, diversity, and a steadfast commitment to freedom. The Minmatar Republic's political framework reflects the very essence of its people: diverse, resilient, and fiercely independent. Unlike the centralized empires of the Amarr or Galente Federation, the Republic was designed as a tribal confederation, where power is shared among the 7 major tribes, rather than vested in a single ruler or authoritarian government. At the heart of this system is the Tribal Council, a governing assembly where each of the 7 tribes selects representatives to voice their people's concerns, interests, and aspirations. This council functions as the Republic's legislative and executive body, responsible for decision-making on matters ranging from defense and foreign policy to cultural preservation and economic reconstruction. This federated approach honors the autonomy and unique traditions of each tribe. While they share common goals and values, the tribes maintain significant independence in managing their internal affairs. For example, the Thukka tribe, with their nomadic lifestyle, oversee caravan routes and trade logistics, while the Bruta tribe emphasize martial discipline and leadership within the Republic's militias. The structure is inherently decentralized, which presents both strengths and challenges. It fosters inclusivity and mutual respect, preventing any single tribe from dominating, yet it requires constant negotiation and compromise. Tribal rivalries, historical grievances, and differing priorities sometimes lead to political friction, but these tensions are balanced by a shared commitment to the Republic's survival and prosperity. At the operational level, each tribe maintains its own militia forces, trained and organized according to tribal traditions. In times of peace, these militias focus on local defense and community security. During conflicts, they coordinate under the Republic's unified command to defend their territory and interests. This system leverages the deep-rooted loyalty and warrior culture of the Minmatar people, allowing for rapid mobilization and effective guerrilla tactics. The Republic also relies heavily on the Thukka caravans to maintain supply lines and inter-tribal communication across their scattered systems. The caravans' expertise in navigating hostile space and maintaining long-distance trade is vital to the Republic's cohesion and economic survival. Culturally, the Republic supports education programs, arts, and the revival of tribal customs through community centers and festivals. The Tribal Council funds efforts to restore lost languages, revive ceremonial practices, and preserve oral histories that were nearly extinguished during the occupation. Ultimately, the structure of the Minmatar Republic is a living embodiment of its history, born from struggle, rooted in diversity, and sustained by unity forged in freedom. However, the political system was also a stage where long-standing tribal tensions played out, profoundly shaping governance and decision-making. while the tribal council's equal representation ensured fairness and prevented domination, in practice, it often resulted in political gridlock fueled by mutual suspicion and competing interests. The Sebiesto, emphasizing diplomacy, administration, and education, frequently sought to centralize authority to build a cohesive national identity and more efficient governance, pushing for stronger external alliances, especially with the Gallente Federation. Other tribes, however, viewed these moves with skepticism. The Bruta, proud warriors fiercely protective of their independence, resisted what they perceived as Sebiesto overreach, arguing to maintain tribal militias' autonomy and prioritize military readiness over political compromise. This often led to heated council debates over defense spending, military strategy, and internal security. Meanwhile, the Nefantar's historical collaboration with the Amarr Empire cast a long shadow over their political participation. Despite equal representation, they were often marginalized or distrusted, complicating coalition building and weakening political unity. The spiritual Verrocchio clashed with the pragmatic Thaka caravanners over resource allocation, reflecting deeper philosophical differences about the Republic's path. Such tensions meant consensus was difficult to achieve. Decisions required extensive negotiation, compromise, and shifting alliances, slowing legislative processes, complicating foreign diplomacy, and occasionally undermining the Republic's ability to respond swiftly to threats. Yet, these challenges reinforced the Republic's commitment to inclusivity and respect for tribal diversity, a deliberate safeguard against repeating imperial mistakes. The result is a political landscape marked by vibrant debate, occasional stalemate, and persistent striving, a reflection of a people still healing from centuries of division, yet determined to honor every tribe's voice. The Republic's primary relationship has been with the Gallente Federation, the faction pivotal in supporting the Minmatar Rebellion. Though sharing cultural and ideological affinities, including freedom and self-determination, the Minmatar remain cautious, seeking partnership without subjugation, and wary of becoming pawns in Gallente politics. This shapes a foreign policy that is cooperative yet guarded, emphasizing mutual respect and sovereignty. Relations with the Amarr Empire, the Republic's former oppressors and adversaries, remain tense. Open war is avoided when possible, but border skirmishes and territorial disputes flare regularly, especially along the contested Minmatar-Amarr frontier. The Republic maintains vigilance through guerrilla tactics and flexible defense, avoiding direct confrontation with the Empire's overwhelming might. Beyond these primary actors, the Republic engages cautiously with others. Trade and communication with the Kaldari state and independent entities like the Thaka caravans provide vital economic lifelines. The Republic's leadership balances pragmatic cooperation with a steadfast commitment to autonomy. Diplomatically, the Republic pursues non-alignment with major power blocs, avoiding entanglements that could compromise sovereignty. This stance reflects practical caution and the Minmatar's historical experience of oppression and betrayal. Internationally, the Republic seeks recognition as a legitimate sovereign entity, participating in interstellar forums despite lingering mistrust and its unconventional political structure. These efforts remain vital to long-term security and prosperity. In all, the Minmatar Republic's foreign policy is a delicate balance, rooted in a fierce determination to remain free, tempered by the realities of a dangerous interconnected cluster. It is a policy defined by pragmatism, resilience, and a commitment to ensuring that the legacy of slavery never repeats. Part 5. Ashes and Embers. The Minmatar Future. The Minmatar Republic stands at a crossroads, a nation born from the ashes of oppression, its embers glowing with the fierce determination of a people who have endured centuries of hardship and emerged resilient. Yet the future holds as many uncertainties as possibilities. The Minmatar face profound challenges as they strive to secure their place in an ever-shifting political landscape, rebuild their shattered worlds, and preserve the cultural identity that defines them. Central to the Republic's future is the delicate balance between tradition and progress. The 7 tribes continue to honor their ancestral customs, languages, and rituals, yet they must also adapt to the demands of modernization, technology, and economic development. As the Empyrean Age novel puts it, they are a people caught between what was stolen from them and what they must become, carrying the scars of slavery even as they grasp toward a new dawn. This struggle embodies the Republic's ongoing evolution, a tension between remembering the past and embracing change. Economically, the Republic seeks to expand beyond the scars of war and rebuilding. Powerful Minmatar corporations, many rooted in tribal communities, are rising, signaling growth and ambition. Yet, as the Day of Darkness Chronicle notes, the Minmatar's journey from slaves to sovereigns is paved with sacrifice. The rebuilding of their worlds demands more than steel and fire. It requires unity and vision. Economic development brings new challenges: resource competition, internal inequalities, and the risk of outside influence threatening the Republic's sovereignty. The Thaka caravans, once nomadic lifelines, now face competition from corporate interests and external trade powers seeking footholds in Minmatar space. Politically, the Republic must continue to manage its complex tribal dynamics. The delicate balance within the Tribal Council requires vigilance, diplomacy, and a commitment to unity despite differing priorities and historical wounds. Emerging voices, especially from younger generations, challenge traditional power structures, advocating for reforms that might redefine what it means to be Minmatar in this new age. A Scope News broadcast from recent years captures this dynamic. The Republic is at a tipping point where old loyalties and new ambitions clash, where the future will be decided not by the scars of slavery, but by the strength of unity. On the interstellar stage, the Minmatar Republic's relationships with other factions remain critical. Maintaining independence while engaging in strategic alliances demands constant attention and deft diplomacy. The shadow of the Amarr Empire looms large, their ambitions a persistent threat. At the same time, the Republic's ties to the Galente Federation and pragmatic dealings with Caldari and other powers reflect a complex web of cooperation and cautious mistrust. Yet despite these challenges, the Minmatar spirit endures. As eloquently expressed in the Empyrean Age, they are the fire that refuses to be extinguished, the embers that light the dark. Their chains were broken, but the memory of the forge remains, a constant reminder of the price of freedom. This spirit, forged in adversity, is marked by a profound sense of identity and a commitment to freedom and self-determination. From the ashes of enslavement, the Republic has risen, its embers glowing with hope and possibility. As the Day of Darkness Chronicles remind us, in every scar, a story, in every struggle, a song of survival. The path ahead will not be easy, but it is theirs to walk, shaping the destiny of a people who refuse to be broken. You've been listening to Stories from New Eden, where the past isn't dead, only buried. If you enjoyed this journey through lost empires, fractured truths, and the shadows of the cluster, be sure to follow and share the podcast. Every transmission helps others find their way through the dark. New episodes drop every week, uncovering deeper layers of EVE's hidden history, from erased black site logs to the forbidden lore that empires tried to silence. Until next time, fly safe, keep your senses sharp, and remember, in New Eden, something is always watching.